Hello friends, you've just unlocked another chapter of the past, hidden, untold, and waiting to be discovered. This is Buried Truths. Let's view the video. Top 10 Deadliest Natural Disasters in History. 1. 1931 China Floods. The 1931 China floods remain the deadliest natural disaster in recorded human history. Triggered by excessive rainfall, melting snow from the mountains, and overflowing rivers, the Yangtze, Yellow, and Huai rivers all burst their banks. These floods destroyed thousands of towns and villages across multiple provinces, displacing over 50 million people. Massive loss of life resulted not only from drowning but also from starvation and widespread disease. The floods lasted several months and affected areas as large as some European countries. Water levels reached record highs, overwhelming existing dikes and flood defenses. Crops were ruined, animals drowned, and entire communities vanished overnight. With government resources stretched thin, relief was minimal, and chaos ruled the countryside. Dead bodies contaminated water sources, accelerating the spread of cholera and typhoid. In some areas, families were forced to sell their children or commit suicide to escape starvation. It was a humanitarian disaster of unprecedented scale. The total death toll is estimated between 2 to 4 million, making it the single most fatal natural calamity ever documented. The tragedy exposed China's weak infrastructure, poor planning, and lack of preparedness, laying the foundation for future reforms in flood control and emergency response. 2. 1556 Shaanxi Earthquake. On January 23, 1556, central China was devastated by the Shaanxi earthquake, the deadliest quake ever recorded. The disaster struck in the early morning, destroying homes, temples, and entire towns in just seconds. Its estimated magnitude is believed to be around 8.0, though no seismic instruments existed at the time. A significant factor in the high death toll was the prevalence of yaodongs, cave dwellings dug into loess cliffs. These homes crumbled instantly, burying thousands alive. The quake demolished 840,000 lives across 97 counties in Shaanxi, Hunan, and Gansu provinces. Few survivors escaped unscathed amid the widespread collapse. The devastation was so intense that the land itself changed, rivers shifted courses, massive fissures split the earth, and new hills formed. Local records mention mountains flattening and the ground opening to swallow buildings. Aftershocks continued for days, heightening fear and destruction in already ruined areas. The disaster crippled regional economies and population centers. Recovery took decades, and survivors lived in fear of recurrence. The 1556 Shaanxi earthquake became a defining tragedy in Chinese history, showing how both human settlement patterns and geological vulnerabilities combined to produce catastrophic outcomes. 3. 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami. On December 26, 2004, a 9.1 to 9.3 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, triggering a monstrous tsunami. The quake was one of the strongest ever recorded and lasted over 10 minutes, displacing a colossal volume of seawater. The waves traveled at jet speeds, hitting coastlines within hours. Tsunami waves as high as 30 meters devastated 14 countries, including Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. The hardest hit areas saw entire communities erased. Coastal cities were inundated, fishing villages demolished, and thousands swept out to sea. The suddenness of the waves left no time for escape. Over 227,000 people died, making it one of the deadliest disasters of modern times. Children made up a large portion of victims. Survivors reported haunting scenes, rooftops covered with corpses, forests filled with bodies, and loved ones torn away in seconds. Entire families were wiped out. This catastrophe led to major global reforms. The world responded with an unprecedented aid effort, and warning systems were installed across the Indian Ocean. It also became a turning point in international disaster coordination and awareness. The event showed that seismic activity could ripple across borders with catastrophic force. 4. 1970 Bola Cyclone. The Bola cyclone struck East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, on November 12, 1970, and remains the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded. Wind speeds of up to 115 miles per hour combined with a massive storm surge devastated the Ganges Delta. Low-lying areas were submerged, and entire islands were wiped off the map. With no effective warning system, people had no time to flee. Villages and towns were caught completely off guard as floodwaters swept away homes, crops, and livestock. Over 500,000 people died, mostly from drowning or exposure in the aftermath. Survivors faced starvation and disease in the flooded ruins. The Pakistani government's delayed and inadequate response sparked nationwide anger. Relief was slow, uneven, and heavily politicized. Public outrage over the disaster's handling fueled political unrest that led to the Bangladesh Liberation War the following year. In a way, the cyclone indirectly contributed to the birth of a new nation. International aid eventually poured in, but the event exposed the region's extreme vulnerability. The Bola cyclone prompted global efforts to improve storm forecasting and disaster response, especially in cyclone-prone zones like South Asia. Yet even decades later, the scars of the Bola tragedy remain deeply embedded in Bangladesh's history. 526 Antioch earthquake. The 526 Antioch earthquake struck the ancient city of Antioch, modern-day Antakya, Turkey, on May 20, 526 AD. As one of the Byzantine Empire's largest cities and a major Christian center, Antioch was packed with people during Ascension Day celebrations, making the timing especially devastating. The quake destroyed much of the city, and fires that followed raged uncontrollably for days. Wooden homes and buildings were reduced to ash, and entire districts burned to the ground. Estimates suggest 250,000 to 300,000 people perished, including residents and pilgrims. The once thriving metropolis became a wasteland of charred ruins. Emperor Justin I dispatched aid, but recovery was slow and partial. Continued aftershocks terrorized survivors, and many fled permanently. Religious interpretations of the disaster dominated records, with many viewing it as divine punishment. Survivors spoke of blood-red skies and flames raining from heaven, a nightmare imprinted in collective memory. The Antioch earthquake marked a turning point in Byzantine urban development. Antioch never fully recovered its former prominence. Lessons learned influenced construction methods across the empire, including the use of stone over wood. Even centuries later, this disaster is remembered as one of the deadliest tragedies of late antiquity. 6. 2008 Sichuan earthquake. On May 12, 2008, a 7.9 magnitude earthquake struck China's Sichuan province. Centered near Wenchuan County, the quake unleashed destruction across mountainous terrain. Entire towns were razed, infrastructure collapsed, and over 87,000 people were killed. It was China's deadliest earthquake in over 3 decades, shocking the nation and the world. Schools bore the brunt of the disaster, with thousands of children killed in classroom collapses. Poor construction standards led to widespread criticism of so-called tofu-dreg buildings. The public, grieving and enraged, demanded accountability. The tragedy sparked rare protests and calls for reform in disaster-resistant architecture. Rescue efforts were immense. The Chinese military, volunteers, and international agencies worked tirelessly in treacherous conditions. Survivors were pulled from rubble days after the quake. Landslides triggered by the earthquake blocked rivers, forming quake lakes that threatened further flooding. Relief operations faced enormous logistical challenges. Despite its horrors, the Sichuan earthquake became a national moment of unity. The Chinese government launched massive reconstruction projects and invested in safer infrastructure. The disaster also pushed China to improve emergency preparedness, making it a transformative moment in the country's modern history. 7. 1815 Mount Tambora eruption. Mount Tambora, located in Indonesia, erupted with unimaginable force in April 1815. It was the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history, discharging over 100 cubic kilometers of ash and debris. The blast was heard over 2,000 kilometers away and darkened skies across Southeast Asia for days. Tens of thousands died instantly from pyroclastic flows, tsunamis, and suffocating ash. Nearby villages were incinerated. The eruption created a caldera nearly 7 kilometers wide. Up to 71,000 people died directly and indirectly. Crops failed, water sources were poisoned, and the atmosphere filled with sulfur, drastically affecting global weather. 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Global temperatures dropped by 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. Europe, North America, and Asia saw widespread crop failures and famine. Snow fell in June, and starvation gripped many regions. Disease spread rapidly among weakened populations, increasing the overall death toll from the eruption. This eruption highlighted the immense power of volcanic activity to influence climate on a global scale. Tambora's legacy is found not only in geological records but in art, literature, and environmental science. It reshaped human understanding of how distant natural events can have worldwide consequences. 8. 1887 Yellow River Flood. In September 1887, China's Yellow River burst through poorly maintained dikes after prolonged rainfall, flooding over 50,000 square miles. Entire cities, towns, and farmlands were submerged. It is one of the deadliest floods ever, with death toll estimates ranging between 900,000 and 2 million people. The flood spread rapidly across the flat North China Plain. People were caught unprepared, and boats became the only way to navigate submerged areas. Disease outbreaks followed, cholera, dysentery, and typhoid flourished in stagnant waters. Starvation struck survivors as farmlands were rendered unusable for months. The Qing dynasty struggled to provide relief. Infrastructure collapse, poor transportation, and bureaucratic red tape hindered aid. Many survivors were left to fend for themselves. Entire communities relocated or vanished, their land transformed into a muddy wasteland. The flood marked a tipping point in China's long battle with its rivers. This catastrophe reinforced the need for modern water management systems. The Yellow River, historically known as China's Sorrow, earned its infamous title. The 1887 flood remains one of the gravest natural disasters ever recorded and a painful reminder of the cost of neglecting nature's power. 9. 1976 Tangshan Earthquake. In the pre-dawn hours of July 28, 1976, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck Tangshan, an industrial city in northern China. The quake leveled nearly every structure in the city within seconds. Official estimates placed the death toll at 242,000, though some believe the real number was much higher. The timing was particularly deadly, striking while most people slept. Entire apartment blocks collapsed like matchsticks. Hospitals, schools, and factories crumbled, trapping thousands. The Chinese government initially suppressed news of the quake, delaying both national and international aid. Survivors were left without shelter, food, or medical assistance. Even aftershocks caused deadly destruction in surrounding cities. Tangshan was reduced to rubble, and rebuilding the city took years. The event deeply scarred the national psyche. It highlighted the vulnerabilities in China's urban planning and the dangers of inadequate seismic monitoring and emergency preparedness. The Tangshan earthquake stands as one of the worst urban disasters of the 20th century. Its legacy lives on in improved building codes and public awareness of earthquake risks. Tangshan today is a symbol of resilience, rising from the ashes of one of history's most lethal quakes. 10. 2010 Haiti earthquake. On January 12, 2010, Haiti was struck by a magnitude 7.0 earthquake just 25 kilometers from its capital, Port-au-Prince. The destruction was catastrophic. Poor construction standards led to the collapse of homes, hospitals, schools, and the presidential palace. Over 160,000 people died, and over 1 million were left homeless. The country's emergency services were virtually non-existent. Survivors lay trapped under rubble for days without rescue. Relief efforts were hampered by destroyed infrastructure. UN headquarters collapsed, killing many aid workers. The international community responded swiftly, but coordination was chaotic, and recovery was painfully slow. Disease followed disaster. A cholera outbreak introduced by foreign peacekeepers claimed thousands more lives. Haitian society struggled with trauma, displacement, and poverty. The earthquake deepened political instability and exposed decades of mismanagement, corruption, and international neglect that left Haiti so vulnerable. The 2010 quake was a humanitarian catastrophe that sparked global reflection. It inspired both generosity and criticism, as billions in aid failed to bring long-term improvement. Haiti's tragedy underscored how poverty and poor governance can magnify the deadliness of natural disasters. Thanks for watching Buried Truths. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden corners of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories from history's hidden vault. See you in the next video.